Sports Talk ATL podcast. I'm Harrison Coburn, and I'm here with Chase Earl. And first of all, I'd like to say I want to apologize for not getting an episode up last week. I ended up being a bit under the weather, and you didn't want to hear the way I sounded. So here we are. We're back again 1 week later, and the good news is we actually have some Falcons talk, which since we started this podcast was kind of the dead time of the year for the Falcons, but preseason started yesterday. Falcons even made a free agency signing. So let's go ahead and talk about that, Chase. Falcons signing Dwight Freeney to a 1 year, $2 million deal. And I think it's mostly incentive. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a big signing for the Falcons. They obviously needed to get better up front and just get a pure pass rusher, and that's what Dwight Freeney is. He's only going to play on situational downs, third downs most likely. And he's going to get after the passer. You know, he just uses that spin move at this point. He's not really going to bull rush you. He's not really going to mess around with anything else. He's going to try to beat you with his patented quick spin move that's been haunting defenders ever since for his 14 years over the NFL. I think it's going to be a good signing. I definitely think he's going to help. I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in Arizona last year because, frankly, at his age, that's almost unrealistic. I mean, he was playing like no sack, 8 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. I mean, he was the leading sack leader for that loaded Cardinals defense.
Yeah, I mean, Freeney was surrounded by a lot of talent, and that's the one reason I don't think he'll be as good. One thing I'd like to mention there was, last season was the best year he had in, 4 or 5 years. So it is a little hard to expect that type of production again, especially with not as much talent down the defensive line helping them out. But with that being said, I mean, the Falcons can use any pass rusher they can get, and the guy's also just like a natural veteran. He's always been a natural leader ever since he stepped into the war room in Indianapolis. So even just having him in a uniform with the lack of pass rushing options the team has now, like he can help everybody on that roster, and he's going to be the best pass rusher Falcons have this year. So there's 1 year, there's no risk in this deal, and I think they're patching a hole that they've caused by not drafting pass rushers in the past few years. So it's a little frustrating in that regard, but considering what the team's dealing with, I think it's a great move.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. You take a look at it, and Freeney hasn't had double-digit sacks since 2010. I mean, before Arizona in 2014, he was with the Chargers. That was just kind of a mess, He looked like he really started showing his age. He didn't even play in 2013 much. He only played in 4 games. So, I mean, he's not going to be as good as he was last year. That was kind of like a quirky season where he just dominated. But, I mean, he's definitely going to add depth. And on third downs, which is really what the Falcons, had a lot of trouble. I mean, quarterbacks have just been able to sit back there on third down and just find a receiver. And it's become awful to watch as a Falcons fan. You just get so frustrated because you get them in the third and long, and they just keep converting and converting. And I think Dwight Freeney is really going to help that this year. And that's what Dan Quinn was looking for in this signing. So, I mean, love the signing. Hope it works out. It very well could just turn out to where he's, struggling with injuries, not in great shape, blah, 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 doesn't do much. But like you said, very little risk in this 1 year deal.
Yeah, and you also trust that Dan Quinn is the defensive mind to utilize him in the best way, He's turned a bunch of goons who were the worst defensive team in football, and 1 year later he made them average. So you got to assume that Quinn knows what he's doing. I mean, he's the one who brought him in, so I think he'll have a productive year for Atlanta. I think maybe 5 or 6 sacks is realistic, but that's a huge boost for these guys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he comes in here and gives us 5 or 6 sacks, which I definitely think is, somewhat realistic. I mean, he had 8 in 11 games last year, but if he gives 5 or 6 sacks, I think that's a huge success. I mean, let's be real. Atlanta's leading sack leader, Vic Beasley, only had 4 sacks last year. So,
yeah, it makes life easier for a guy like Vic Beasley, When you have Dwight Freeney passing the rusher as well, I mean, you're not going to get as much, double coverage and all that stuff. And, it makes life easier for everybody on the defensive line.
That's a great point. I mean, I think one of the biggest things you have to have in the NFL if you want to be successful on defense, is two guys who can get after the passer, because that makes all the difference. And having one guy just isn't enough. I mean, last year I don't even think Atlanta had one. I mean, Vic Beasley, still a rookie, only had 4 sacks. This year, I think, I mean, Beasley's going to be playing a lot of linebacker, but I still think, you got at least one good pass rusher and Beasley, and I think you have another one in Dwight Freeney. That can make all the difference for Atlanta. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Another guy the Falcons have now kind of been linked to, not really, but just kind of rumors up in the air. Greg Hardy, which is obviously a very interesting name. He's had a ton of headlines around him over the last 2 years, from domestic violence to teammates disputes. I mean, nothing really good. But prior to all that, this guy was one of the best pass rushers in the league. So, what do you think? What do you think about all this?
I think that it's probably pretty unlikely that the Falcons are this mystery team that have been looking into Greg Hardy. He actually worked out for the Jaguars, but they opted not to sign him at that time. First of all, I think it would be kind of cool to get Greg Hardy and see him do well, just because they're in the same division as the Panthers and his former team. I think it would make it interesting. I think it would make the rivalry that much better. And having another pass rusher of that caliber, obviously, it'll make the rivalry a lot more competitive. But I also think that I think it's very unlikely that Arthur Blank and Thomas Dimitroff are the two guys that would want to take a chance on him, especially Dimitroff, just because his job is year to year it's in jeopardy. Nobody knows if he's going to be back. So I don't know if he's the risk the Falcons are looking at taking. And with Freeney signed, I don't think they addressed that hole, but I think they addressed it as far as they're going to before now in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I agree. This could be something that's not even really on, the Falcons' mind at this point, especially after signing Freeney. But the one thing that's undeniable is Hardy's talent. I mean, his last 2 full seasons in Carolina, he had 26 sacks combined. He had 6 sacks last year in just 12 games after his 4-game suspension. He was a pretty effective pass rusher. I mean,
Most
if
definitely.
you sign Hardy if you're the Falcons, it's without a doubt he's your best pass rusher. So, I mean, it definitely could make him better. And the one thing I will say is, like, if you look at a lot of the guys Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn drafted in Seattle, they kind of, turned not like a huge blind eye, but they definitely did, their own investigating when it came to who they're going to sign. They didn't let what they've heard from other people and stuff get in the way. So if there is any good in Greg Hardy, which I really don't think there is, I think Dan Quinn will find it. But I think he's kind of a mess in the head, really. So I don't see this happening. But if there was any good in him, I definitely think Dan Quinn would be the one to find it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason. Pass rush is one of the most important things in football, and there's 32 NFL teams out there, and Greg Hardy is not employed by one of them at this time. So obviously, it's not his performance on the field that's hindering him from getting that contract. It's his personality, and we may never see this guy in the league again. You just really never know with Greg Hardy. But
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I remember just reading some of the stuff and doing some of like my own personal reports on the Greg Hardy assault injury, and just it really was disgusting to read. And the fact that he didn't get more time suspended is almost absurd. 10 games for what he was doing, while you see like the NFL handing out 1-year bans for marijuana use like it's nothing. That's something the
look
NFL
at a guy like Ray Rice. All right, we need to do that again. We were talking at the same time. Go ahead.
I just think that's something the NFL definitely needs to take a look at going forward.
Yeah, most definitely. And it is frustrating to see how Ray Rice pretty much his career's over from domestic violence. And he's actually a good guy who made a mistake and has made a point to, spread awareness for domestic violence ever since. And then you have Greg Hardy, who's an animal. He's literally like a trained killer pretty much. And he's not on a team right now, but he probably will be on one. And, at the end of the day, all they care about is talent. It's talent.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Let's turn the corner here, though. We actually had one of our writers, Shailin Singh, go to Falcons training camp, and he has some notes here for us. He said that Tevin Coleman looks super explosive, and he had a couple runs where he blew by everybody for touchdowns. Pretty much everybody at linebacker took reps with the first team. That includes Campbell, Jones, Spoon, Wheeler, Warlow, and Beasley. Devontae Campbell and Keanu Neal's size and speed really stood out. Julio didn't take that many reps, probably because he didn't need them. Justin Hardy looks way better than last year, and Matt Ryan had a couple options and designed runs. So, you make anything of
Yeah.
those notes, Chase?
Well, I wrote something earlier this week on Coleman taking on a bigger role in the offense, and I think that's just because he really
there?
is that talented.
Yeah, Chase. I lost you there.
Yeah.
Go ahead and say it again. You just the
Uh, okay.
connection.
I got you.
Yeah.
Well, he mentions Coleman looking super explosive, and I think that's. And I wrote something earlier this week on Coleman having going to have a bigger role in this offense this year. I mean, Devontae Freeman had a huge year, but they want to get Coleman more involved, and that's for multiple reasons. One is Coleman really is this talented. I mean, he has breakaway speed, and he can make big plays every time he touches the ball. The Falcons don't view this third-round pick as a wasted draft pick, even though he struggled last year holding on to the football. I think they think that's a thing of the past. Hopefully, he doesn't have a problem holding on the football this year, but I think big things are coming from Tevin Coleman.
Yeah, I think one thing that Bill Belichick has actually done a great job in recent years, and it drives fantasy owners crazy, is he'll have a smaller back who's great at stepping out and passing catches, and then you'll have one bruiser. And that's what the Falcons kind of have in Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman. They have kind of like their own Deion Jones and LeGarrette Blount type deal going. So, you got lightning and thunder pretty much. I think that's the best way to address the rushing game, and I think that the Falcons are going to be great on the ground this year. I mean, with here's the center again. Shit.
Alex Mack.
Yeah, with Alex Mack in town too, the offensive line will only be better. So that Falcons run game will be dangerous. Tevin Coleman is definitely going to play a pretty big role.
You get that offensive line in year 2 with Shanahan and the new zone blocking scheme, which was really effective last year. I wasn't too fond of Shanahan's work all around, but the one thing that was clearly effective was the run game, and it was much better than it had been in recent years. It's something the Falcons have started to establish, and I think Coleman and Freeman are both going to have really good years. I thought another thing that Singh said that I thought was very interesting was way better than he did last year. He was actually put on the first depth chart as the number 2 receiver, which is something, we just gave Mohamed Sanu this big contract, and he's more of a slot receiver. I mean, he can play the slot well. But I just thought him being the number 2 receiver on the opening depth chart was interesting because, I mean, he didn't get a ton of reps, even though he played well at the end of last season. But big things expected for Hardy this year, and he's showing it in training camp.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the make or break year for him because, even though the Falcons just gave Sanu all that money, I think he has the talent to become the number 2 wide receiver at some point. So we're probably looking at him being the number 3, and we're hoping that he can be that Harry Douglas type guy who can just give you a bunch of production as your third receiver and be a good, kind of bailout option. When teams are really covering Julio Jones up the butt. So Hardy will be a big X factor for the Falcons offense this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hardy's going to be terrific. But more recently, the Falcons had their first preseason game last night, and they won 23-17. The game was a lot closer as it came to an end than it was for the majority. But the offense the first string offense didn't get a lot of reps. Second string offense, it looked pretty good. I mean, Matt Schaub was really crisp. The highlight of the game was J.D. McKenzie's 100-yard return, and that was just an unbelievable play, and it made many fans quickly forget about the departure of Devin Hester, who the Falcons recently just released. So I thought
and
the
maybe
biggest.
that's a big reason why.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be a big reason why. I mean, he definitely looked like a guy who could be returning kicks for a while. Coleman was also listed as the first string kick returner in the depth chart. I wonder if that's going to be changing after the first preseason game. But yeah, I thought there was a lot of good things. The Falcons were up 20-3, going into half. Deion Jones, the Falcons' second-round pick, was terrific. He led the team with 5 tackles, but I think you just got to see what Deion Jones is going to bring at that weak side linebacker position as a guy who can make plays all over the field from sideline to sideline, and he was doing that all day, whether it was in the pass game and coverage or against the run. He was really explosive, and you saw the physicality that Dan Quinn really wants in his defense and some of those picks last night, like Deion Jones.
Well, I think the main thing for Falcons fans is the good news is they rested players that have been dealing with injuries in any recent history, really, and you came away with no real major injuries from this preseason game. So honestly, I think that's what you really have to look for as a fan, keeping these guys healthy. Get a good look at some guys that are lower down the depth chart that you don't really get the chance to see behind the scenes. But other than that, I think having a quiet first preseason game that's good.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot more in these next 2 preseason games, and it's going to from the first team guys. But I'm really excited to see Neal get on the field. They rested him with like a minor trunk injury, whatever that is. I'm not really sure what that is. But yeah, I'm really excited to see him on the field. But really, I mean, I was excited to see Deion Jones, and that was what I was most happy with yesterday. I was really happy with his performance. So I really want him to win the linebacking job and get in there because I think our linebacking play was definitely one of our weakest parts of our defense last year. So Campbell, Jones, I really get excited when I see those guys playing well.
Well, let's move on to some Hawks talk here. One guy that the Hawks have been linked to in trade rumors as a guy that they may go after is Rudy Gay of the Sacramento Kings. And there's been controversy between rival Atlanta sports websites here whether this would be a good move for Atlanta, but I think we've asserted ourselves as of the pro Rudy Gay bunch. Let's just dive into that for a second and talk about that a little bit, Chase.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a piece on it earlier just because so many people were talking about it. So I thought I should join in. I mean, this was something me and you have been talking about for halfway through last season, where we were just like, yeah, we should find a way to get Rudy Gay. I mean, this is a guy who could help us. And
Yeah.
I understand all the he doesn't fit the system. He shoots too much, like blah blah blah. He's inefficient, but I'm just looking at the stats, and even by these advanced statistics that are supposed to just kill Rudy Gay, he's a much better player than Kent Bazemore, Kyle Korver, whoever you want to put out there on the wing for the Hawks that we have right now. Even in Rudy Gay's worst statistics, he's better than them at. So there's no doubt,
Yeah.
with
I mean, my main thing is
we get better. There's no doubt that we get better with him. Does he put us over the top? Probably not. Do we get better? Yes.
yeah, and I mean, it gives the Hawks that guy who can finally take the last shot. I mean, I think Paul Millsap has definitely asserted himself as the best player on this team, and I mean, now with Dwight Howard in town, he may take that role from Millsap. I mean, I think definitely be Howard's team, but Rudy Gay is that guy we need to take that last shot. And Millsap's proven he can't do it. Nobody in the Hawks can really do it. And if you want to be a great basketball team, you've got to have that guy. I mean, I've seen so many game-winning shots of Rudy Gay just having that confidence to, pull it up. And I know some people may think he's a little trigger happy, but you let him play for a former, NBA Coach of the Year and Coach Budenholzer, who runs an advanced system. It's the same thing with Dwight Howard. If he had gone somewhere else, I probably would have said, maybe he'll probably have an average year. But I think this is a great opportunity for him, and he's going to have a great year because of that. I think it's the same thing for Rudy Gay. I mean, playing with a guy like Kyle Korver, and then also having Dwight Howard down low. I mean, Gay, he's still going to get his shots because he's going to be so open still. You know, you dish that ball down low, there's two people going at Dwight Howard or Paul Millsap. Um, Korver is one of the best plus minus players in the league, and his teammates will tell you he's the X factor of the offense. When Korver's on, the Hawks are on, and you give him a real scoring threat around that. That's when the Hawks get dangerous, in my opinion. I think it just makes them such a better team, and I think with that team, you're taking a couple games from Cleveland in a series, and that's progress.
I think the most frustrating thing when talking about Rudy Gay or Dwight Howard or any of these guys or talking with any of these people who think that the Hawks have this strict system of players that we can only fit in and that we need like guys like Damari. Like, who was Damari Carroll before he came to the Hawks? Like, why do people not understand that Coach Budenholzer is a terrific coach? This is a terrific system that they run. Why can Coach Budenholzer make Damari Carroll go from a nobody into a borderline all-star caliber player getting $15 million a year? Why can he do that, but he can't make a guy who's already an all-star play like an all-star in Rudy Gay? Like, that's, to me, is just my mind gets blown when people don't understand. I just don't understand that at all.
And we're talking about a guy who it's likely not going to take a lot of assets to get. I mean, the Kings have been trying to move him because he's made it clear he wants out. I don't blame him. I mean, Cousins wants out. Everybody wants out of Sacramento. So
Who
I
wants
don't
to be
think
in
he.
Sacramento? I mean,
Yeah,
we can get them for basically nothing, and it's basically a trial run. And who knows? What if this is one of those years where Cleveland doesn't exactly click? They have this championship hangover, uh, blah blah blah, and there's no doubt you put Dennis Schroeder, Kent Bazemore, Rudy Gay, Kyle Korver, Dwight Howard, Paul Millsap on a team, along with the rest of our depth. I mean, we will compete with Cleveland physically. On defense, we will be able to compete with them. We'll have one of the best defensive lineups. We'll be extremely athletic, extremely long. We're not going to get out rebounded, and we've been there multiple times. And
and
if Cleveland's ever weak, someone's going to beat them. Why can't it be us? Why not take that chance that maybe they're a little weaker this year, and maybe this is our chance to get to the finals.
well, say whatever you want negative about Rudy Gay, Dwight Howard. You go into a series with Cleveland, those two guys on your roster, you have a force on the boards and a great scorer, and that's something the Hawks did not have last year. And frankly, that's some those. You there?
Yeah, I lost you.
Could you not hear what I was saying?
I couldn't hear what you were saying, but I don't know if it got recorded or not. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Because I don't know if I disconnected or you disconnected.
All right, I'm just gonna say it again and then edit it. Okay.
All right.
All right. Cool. You go into a series with Cleveland with Rudy Gay and Dwight Howard on your roster. As much as they've been criticized, you have two things: you have a force on the boards, and you have a great score. And those are two things you need to beat a team like Cleveland. And frankly, those are the two things you need to win in the postseason. And the Hawks haven't had those in the past, and they still don't have that great score.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the biggest thing with Rudy Gay that's against, like, if I'm saying I don't want to get Rudy Gay, it's not because I don't think he's going to make us a better team. It's because I don't think he's going to put us over the top. Do I actually think with Rudy Gay the Hawks beat Cleveland? No. I think maybe they take a game, maybe they take two, maybe they force it to 7. Who knows? I definitely think they're better. I just don't think they're really championship contenders with Rudy Gay. But so I understand if I don't want to give any future value up for a guy who I don't think is going to make us a championship contender. So I get that argument. That's really where the only point lies. I think if you don't think Rudy Gay would make Atlanta better, I think that's just dumb. Anything else I can really say to it? I mean, he definitely would make us 4 or 5 wins better.
I mean, personally, I'd rather give up like that Timberwolves first round pick just to have his bird rights next offseason when Paul Millsap might hit free agency. Dennis Schroeder hits restricted free agency, and Rudy Gay is only on a 1 year deal too. But I mean, I have a feeling that with all the bad teams Rudy Gay has played on, if we were willing to offer the money, he'd probably be back with the Hawks because I just think it'd be such a good situation for him. I think he'd have one of the best years of his career. But getting those Bird years, we're going to talk about Paul Millsap's contract here in a little bit. But let's say Paul Millsap opts back into his deal, and you have a small cap hold with Dennis Schroeder, even though he's probably going to get close to a max deal. Hopefully, that's assuming he has a breakout year this year. You have Gay too. You can still go and sign another piece before signing those guys using their bird rights. So that's a big deal too. I still think it's worth giving up a little assets just to be able to have bigger dice to roll this time next year.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I think that's something we've talked about a lot. I definitely think acquiring Rudy Gay is intriguing because if he ever can become a somewhat efficient basketball player, fit into the system, which I don't see why Mike Budenholzer couldn't convince him to do. Like unless you're just saying Rudy Gay is anti-winning and he just hates winning, then I think I just think it's misconception and just kind of like it's the same thing with Dwight Howard. And I think they're gonna prove you wrong. Dwight Howard's gonna have a big year this year. I'm telling you guys, he's gonna have a great year. If he's healthy, he's gonna be great.
Well, I think one thing, I think a lot of people think that it's just a given that Paul Millsap will probably opt out and see what he's worth on the open market next year. But in my opinion, first of all, I don't think he was too phased by the trade rumors. He kind of downplayed it, so I'm not too worried about that anymore. But he's already re-signed here once. I think he knows that if he opts into that last year and it makes it easier for his team to add a piece, he'll do that because the salary cap's only going to be higher that next year, and he's still making $20 million. And being able to sign that contract 1 year later, he's probably still going to get the same amount of money in the same amount of years. So why not get paid fat that extra year down the road? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean Millsap is gonna be. First of all, when Millsap signed with Atlanta, he already took a little pay cut. I think like a million and a half a year. So $4 or $5 million total, which obviously showed that he was committed. It's interesting to see how committed he'll be after this year. I think this year is going to be big. I mean, we're going to have to play at least as well as we did last year. I can't see Paul Millsap, giving us any kind of break financially or even wanting to stay in Atlanta if we take some sort of step back, after letting Al Horford and Jeff Teague walk. If he sees us taking a step back, he's at the point of his career and he deserves to be where he should be thinking about championships. This is definitely going to be his last big contract. So I think it's really dependent on how Atlanta does this year. If we look promising, and that's why acquiring Rudy Gay could be even more essential. If we have a better year with him, win 55 games, dealing with these contracts, dealing with Millsap's contract, convincing guys to come here will obviously be a lot easier. If we go out here and struggle and, we're in trouble. I mean, we're in trouble. We're in a bad spot.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take a look at the schedule. It just came out yesterday. What are a few games that excite you for the upcoming season?
Well, I just wrote on that earlier today. Um, Obviously, Cleveland. We got 4 matchups against the Cavs. I think those are going to be big. I think we're going to do a lot better than we did last year. I mean, 2 years ago we went 3-1 against them. Last year we went 0-3. We're 0-11 in our last 11 games against them, which is honestly just really shocking considering the quality of the teams the Hawks are. I mean, you got to give the Cavs credit; they're a great team, NBA champions last year, but the Hawks are a very, very good team, and to beat us 11 times in a row is quite shocking. So, I think we're definitely going to go out there and give them our best, and I think we'll snag 2 against them. Hopefully, I think Dwight Howard gives us a better edge against them, and then I'm really intrigued to see Dwight Howard go back to Houston and Jeff T come back to Phillips Arena. Those both happen in 2017. So on the back half of the schedule, so you got a while to wait. But those two big stars heading back to their former teams are definitely going to make some intriguing matchups.
Yeah, most definitely. Another note is the Rockets were really, really serious in looking at Kent Bazemore and I think Al Horford as well. So that makes that rivalry a little bit more juicy too, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean Bazemore takes a few $1 million less to stay with Atlanta than to go to Houston or LA. You know, that was reported when he was signed with us. So yeah, that makes it a little more interesting too.
let's move on to some let's move on to some Braves talk here. Obviously, the big move since the last time we podcasted here was acquiring Matt Kemp from the Padres. Let's dive into that. You know, it's been a couple of weeks, so we don't have to get too deep into this, but this was a big move for Atlanta. First off, getting rid of Hector Oliveira's contract, and second of all, getting a slugger he can hit behind Freddie Freeman in the lineup. And even though his stats since coming to Atlanta haven't been too spectacular, you know, he's hit a home run, he's shown flashes. Just the impact of him being in the lineup, I think it's been huge for the Braves, and I don't think it's any coincidence that this lineup's been clicking more ever since Kemp got here.
Yeah, just having his powerful bat in the middle of the lineup has been huge, and he's come up with some clutch hits. It hasn't been exactly beautiful. He struck out a lot since being here, but you know that's something he's going to do, and that's something you live with. But he's definitely going to be a guy who's going to be a force in the middle of that lineup for the next few seasons, and I've loved watching him. It's actually fun, a little more fun to watch the Braves again because you know we got a few guys who can hit the ball out of the park and stuff now. You know, it makes all the difference having him right there in the middle of the lineup, and
Definitely. And
it's the next step to becoming a contender again.
yeah, definitely. Definitely makes the Braves more fun to watch. And just the fact that he grew up a Braves fan as well, that article he did for the Players Tribune was, you know, it really touched my heart just being a longtime Braves fan. So that was a cool little read as well. I wish him the best. I mean, the Hector Oliveira money was essentially dead money. I mean, the Braves were gonna release him. So only taking on an extra $8 million and getting a slugger for nothing gives them a head start on free agency. Changes the complexity of a lineup. I mean, we're talking about a rebuilding team not having to give up any assets to acquire, you know, its second best hitter. So I think it's a great move for the Braves, and I also think the guys are looking at his WAR and his defensive ability in left field. Some people are criticizing, don't think he's as good a player. Look, first of all, we have Ender and Ciarte in center field. I mean, he could play the whole outfield by himself, I'm pretty convinced. And second of all, I mean, I just think that's a statistic that is just so defensive based. And even John Coppolella said it himself, it's just too much emphasis on defense. This is a guy who he's going to hit bombs, he's going to hit doubles, he's going to slug, he's going to knock in runs. His on base percentage is down a little bit this year, but I think it's an outlier. Matt Kemp's a great player. I'm happy to have him on the Braves.
Yeah, I'm excited to have him, and I can't wait till next season. You know, just watching the Braves over the last 10 games and starting to win some ball games and play good baseball with this lineup. You know, 6-3 with Matt Kemp in the lineup. It's fun to see, and it's got me ready for next season. So another trade that's happened since we last were podcast was Hunter Cervenka, who headed to the Marlins. Who was already sent to AAA after a couple appearances with them, and he had one decent start where he didn't give up any runs, but then in his next outing he gave up 3 and didn't fail to record an out and was immediately sent to AAA. So it looks like the Braves already won that trade.
Yeah, I actually read something, and it definitely had to do with his struggles when Cervenka left the Braves and went to the Marlins. I also read something that said that something about that move. I think it gave them an extra year of control on him or something like that. So there's a little bit more behind the scenes to that, but even with all that being said, I think it's a pretty meh trade. But you still get two prospects. You get Anthony Seymour, who apparently is now the fastest player in the organization, and when you have a guy in Malik Smith who stole 88 bases in the minor league system, he's faster than him. That's saying something, you know. So maybe this guy can be Michael Bourne. Maybe he can be Willie Harris. You know, I don't know what this guy's future is. It may be nothing, but it still gives the Braves another bat to work with as a prospect, another shortstop prospect who, you know, as we know, those are very valuable. And then we also got a lefty in Michael Mader who has had a good 2016, and you know, lefties don't grow on trees. So Cervenka was found in the independent league and was signed a minor league deal from the Braves. So we've seen with Alvarez and Harrell and Cervenka, copies picking up scraps and flipping them. You know, so I think he should probably get his own show on like HGTV. You know, I mean, just picking up little properties and making them look real nice and selling them. And now he's going to
Flip,
use all
flip
those
that
little
house.
properties to
Flip
sell to
that.
get the big house.
Flip that house. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Copy's done a great job, just like getting the most out of everyone, and that's I think why most Braves fans and me and you both have been surprised that Jim Johnson hasn't found his way onto another MLB team. You know, he's only signed to the end of this year. He's older. You know, he doesn't really look to have a future with the Braves. I mean, he's been with us for the majority of the last two seasons, but you know, he's pitching terrific now. I mean, he won Player of the Week, you know, for his performance last week. He's pitched great this week. I mean, every time he's came in, he's thrown strikes. It seems like the inning's over in less than 5 minutes.
yeah,
He's been fantastic.
Johnson's been great, and first of all, he's not going anywhere now because the Braves did place him on waivers to try to get a deal done. Unfortunately, a team did claim him, and a deal couldn't be worked out, so the Braves pulled him. And if they were to put him back on waivers now, they wouldn't be able to revoke that waivers. So they don't want to risk losing him outright. So he'll remain with the Braves for the rest of the season. I think it's really a testament to Roger McDowell, how great of a pitching coach he has been. You see a lot of these guys have come in during his tenure and, you know, like no-name guys like David Carpenter and, you know, even Luis Avalon. Like they had dynamic seasons with McDowell as their pitching coach. And I think, you know, there's no coincidence that Cervenka and Alvarez haven't done as well anywhere else. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Jim Johnson got traded to LA and couldn't do anything last year. I think Roger McDowell is on like this a testament to that. You know, I mean, Hunter Cervenka, Dario Alvarez, these guys are guys that we picked up on waivers. I mean, we trade and we gave them trade value, you know, based on a short sample size. And I think that Roger McDowell, his, you know, whatever money we're paying him is damn worth it, you know?
Yeah, McDowell's one of the best pitching coaches in the league, and that's something you know the Braves have had for a while is some great pitching coaches. I think the big thing with Johnson is I just kind of I wonder, you know, is he going to be on the team next year? You know, I'd like to have him back. It's kind of like he kind of serves as like the old veteran arm at the back end of the bullpen that you have with all these young guys coming in. So I mean, I wonder if that's their thinking behind it. They just couldn't get a prospect that was worth dealing the value that Jim Johnson is currently bringing to the team.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't mind having him back. We're going to have a long list of young guys who are going to be ready, and we're going to talk about a couple in a second here, ready to contribute to this bullpen. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought. And but the thing is, none of them really have much big league experience. Jim Johnson's a guy who has had over 50 saves in a season twice and still pitching at a high level and you know, threw that sinker ball very similar to Roger McDowell. And that I think that's why he's done his best work under him in recent years. And I think that's also a big reason why I'm big on Rob Whalen being very successful in Atlanta is having that sinker ball pitch and having a pitching coach like that working with him. But God, I just lost my train of thought again. What was I even saying, dude?
You were talking about Rob Whalen.
No, before that, Jim Johnson.
No.
Oh, okay, but yeah, I mean, I think at least one of those guys has to have a lot of experience, especially if they plan on being a competitive team. You want to have that experienced veteran out there in a high pressure situation. If it's tied up in the eighth inning, you need to get to the ninth. You want Jim Johnson going in there. I mean, Mauricio Cabrera is dynamic and obviously has a bigger role for the future, but I think I'd rather throw out Jim Johnson because he has that experience. He's not a rookie. So I think
Yeah,
that the Braves should definitely try to bring him back on like a 1 year deal next year. But I also think if he keeps up the way he's pitching right now, he'll probably price himself out of the Braves price range just because he's looking at having ERA in the twos and relief pitching has gone expensive. So
I mean, you could be right, but I also think there's incentive for Jim Johnson to want to stay in Atlanta. I mean, at this point, is it really about the money? And he's had his best career. He's had his best years in the back half of his career with the Braves. I mean, he was awful with Los Angeles last year. And like you said, that's no coincidence. Roger McDowell's really
yeah,
learned
definitely.
from Johnson. He's gotten better, and I think he's really comfortable in Atlanta. And so I think right now you kind of have a perfect match. So I actually expect to see Johnson on the roster next year.
Well, it's actually funny because a fellow Brave, Eric O'Flaherty, when he was with the Athletics with Jim Johnson, when he was having just that awful little stint after his time with Baltimore, O'Flaherty literally said to him, you need to go work with Roger McDowell. He'd be the perfect guy for you to work with. And it's been a match made in heaven. I mean, he's been great in an Atlanta uniform. Not so spectacular with the Dodgers. But McDowell does have a couple of new arms to work with now. Jason Hirsch and Akil Morris both getting called up. I've been anticipating this move for a while, and I'm actually really, really excited to see this bullpen. Morris was acquired in this year's annual Kelly Johnson deal, but he's been much better with the Braves. He was with the Mets this year. 18 appearances for Mississippi, 2.78 ERA. Hitters only hitting 214 off of him. He's going to have to get his walk rate down to be a real dynamic reliever, but he's definitely good. He was a top prospect in the Mets system, so be exciting to watch him. And then Jason Hirsch also, he was a first round pick in 2013 who a lot of people had given up on. He had a lot of trouble as a starter. Moved to the bullpen. It's been great ever since. He can bring the heat, and I'm really excited to watch both these guys, and I think they'll be able to contribute day one.
Yeah, just two guys that are going to continue to keep adding to this bullpen. That's already been spectacular. So, I mean, if these guys can be anything like what some of these other guys, young guys, have been like that we've called up over the past month or so, there's just a lot of bright things to look at with this rebuild. And like the best thing right now is the bullpen, and that's the first thing that's really coming into form. And you can see how much it's helping us now in the majors.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, we're at the tail end of our episode here. Let's just run through real quick and talk about some guys that the Braves still may deal before the end of the season here. One of them is Nick Markakis. He's really turned on in recent weeks. His $10 million per year deal makes him a likely candidate to make it through waivers. I think it's inevitable he's at least dealt this winter. It's great to see Markakis finally bring up his trade value. Do you think the Braves will trade him before the end of the season?
Uh, I mean, it obviously depends if he can get through waivers, but I think he's one of the most attractive uh, bats that could be available at the waiver wire. He's getting paid about $11 million. At what point though does Markakis become a solution rather than a trade value? I mean, we just have so many loaded. We have a loaded outfield right now with young guys, and I just think he has to be dealt sooner rather than later. I mean, he's playing really well. I think any playoff team would love to have a guy like Markakis. He just gives you a professional bat every time he steps up to the plate, and that's why I think he would be great for any playoff team. But I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of weird. I kind of like Jim Johnson. I kind of expected this to happen already, but it hasn't. So
Yeah. Well, one other guy who's heated up recently, who I think the
I
Braves would move in an instant, is Eric Ibar.
yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that they would move him in an instant. I mean, he's definitely not in the Braves' plans for the future. That'll pretty much take anything for him. He actually has been playing pretty well lately. He had a double and a home run in the last game versus the Brewers. You know, he has what? He's working in a 15-game hitting streak. I don't think that ended yet.
No, it ended the other night. I think he had it
Did
up to
it?
14 games,
He
which
got
is
up to
pretty
14.
impressive.
Then he followed it up with a double and a home run. So, I mean, he's been playing really well, and his defense has actually been pretty good, especially considering how he started off the year. But yeah, at this point, I think the Braves will take about anything they can get for Ibar.
Yeah, he's been playing a lot better. Markakis has been hot. Inciarte has been hot. Garcia has been hot. So it's really been,
What about Inciarte?
with Arte playing the way Inciarte was supposed to be playing when we acquired him, and Ibar's playing the way he was supposed to play when we acquired him. We're finally getting to see more of Copy's vision, I think, because this team wasn't supposed to be this bad. So they've been a lot more enjoyable to watch. Hopefully they can stay hot, and I'm hoping they can be kind of like the Astros, and even though they're going to come off last place or near last place season, just take those steps to being a good team as soon as next year. I mean, all it takes is one winner to really turn the corner on this rebuild, and you're starting to see all the arms form, and Dansby and Ozzy will be here before you know it. This is going to be a new look team next year, and you got to develop those winning habits now. You don't want to be learning those on the fly.
Well, one other trade possibility, and this is kind of going along with Nick Markakis. You know, we have Malik Smith at NCRJ. NCRJ's obviously been on fire on offensive late. He's always been terrific in the field. He's had a great reputation. But I think there's no doubt NCRJ is going to be a really good MLB player for a long time. But I think if Atlanta wants to really make a move for a power bat or a power arm or any big move this free agency, NCRJ is the guy that they can package and move for a big haul in return. So I think that's something you could watch out for. And then maybe Nick Markakis doesn't get traded. So
Yeah, it keeps the options open. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for today's podcast. I had a lot to talk to you about. Sorry about last week once again. You can't control the immune system sometimes, but we'll be back at you next Friday. Thank you for listening, and go Braves, go Falcons, go Hawks. Thanks, y'all.
you're a douche.
I was waiting for you to say something.